A young girl was scolded by a billionaire while selling sweets outside his office building, only for him to break down later when he discovered the reason behind her efforts. The summer sun shone brightly over London's bustling Fleet Street, illuminating the stately facades and glass-fronted office buildings that house some of the city's most prestigious firms. Among the steady flow of suited executives and curious tourists, a small yet determined figure stood out. Ellie, a 12-year-old girl with sparkling eyes and an unwavering smile. Dressed in a simple floral apron over a plain dress, Ellie carried a wicker basket filled with homemade sweets. The enticing aroma of cinnamon and vanilla lingered in the air around her, catching the attention of passers-by. With slightly trembling hands but a steady voice, she approached employees entering and leaving the towering headquarters of Whitmore Industries. "Good morning, sir. Would you like to try some homemade sweets?" "These are my grandma's recipes," Ellie would say, holding out her basket to a hurried executive. Some walked past without a glance, others smiled politely and declined, but occasionally someone would stop to buy a treat, filling Ellie's heart with hope. The imposing Whitmore Industries building stood like a giant of glass and steel, its mirrored facade reflecting the bright blue sky and fluffy clouds. Ellie gazed up in awe at the structure, imagining what it must be like to work in such an impressive place. The morning passed uneventfully until a sleek silver sports car screeched to a halt in front of the building. The engine growled one last time before silencing, and the door opened to reveal Henry Whitmore, the billionaire CEO and owner of the company. Tall, with impeccably styled silver hair and a tailored suit, Henry exuded an aura of power and impatience. His face was set in a scowl, his sharp eyes glinting behind thin-framed glasses. He slammed the car door shut with a force that made Ellie instinctively step back. Henry strode toward the entrance, his gaze fixed on the smartphone in his hand. Summoning all her courage, Ellie stepped forward. "Good morning, sir. Would you like to try a homemade sweet? They're delicious and—" Henry stopped abruptly, his icy gaze locking onto the girl. "What is this?" he barked, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Who allowed you to stand here?" Caught off guard by his hostility, Ellie stammered, I'm just selling sweets, sir, to help my grandma." "This is unacceptable," Henry thundered, and his face flushing with anger. "You're disturbing my employees and tarnishing the image of my company. You can't loiter here begging." His words struck Ellie like daggers. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but she fought to keep them at bay. "But sir, I'm not begging. I'm selling." "Enough," Henry snapped, turning to the two burly security guards stationed at the entrance. "Remove this girl immediately. I don't want to see her here again." The guards exchanged uneasy glances but dared not challenge Henry's orders. They approached Ellie, their towering figures casting shadows over her small frame. "I'm sorry, miss, but you have to leave," one of them said, his gruff voice attempting to sound gentle. Ellie stepped back, her basket trembling in her hands. "But I haven't done anything wrong," she protested, her voice breaking. One of the guards reached out to take her arm, but Ellie recoiled. In the sudden movement, the basket slipped from her grasp, landing on the ground with a soft thud. The carefully wrapped sweets spilled onto the pavement, some crushed under the feet of hurrying pedestrians. It was then that Ellie's tears finally broke free. She dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the scattered sweets, sobbing uncontrollably. Across the street, a young Whitmore Industries employee named Claire watched the scene unfold with horror. Her heart ached at the sight of Ellie's distress, but fear of losing her job rooted her to the spot. She bit her lip, tears of guilt and shame filling her eyes. Henry, seemingly satisfied with the outcome of his orders, straightened his tie and entered the building without a backward glance. The security guards, visibly uncomfortable, muttered inaudible apologies before returning to their posts. With trembling hands and a tear-streaked face, Ellie gathered what remained of her belongings. Her dreams of helping her grandma, of doing something good, now seemed impossibly far away. With one last look at the towering building that now symbolized her humiliation, she stood and walked away. As Ellie trudged down the street, her steps heavy and her heart heavier, she couldn't imagine that this cruel moment would spark a chain of events that would change not only her life, but also the lives of many others. Behind her, the London sun continued to shine, indifferent to the small tragedy that had just played out on its bustling streets. The sun was beginning to set as Ellie finally reached her neighborhood on the east side of London. The narrow streets and aging buildings were a stark contrast to the opulence of the city center. She climbed the worn steps of her apartment building, carrying the weight of her disappointment along with her nearly empty basket. As she opened the door to their small flat, Ellie was greeted by the familiar silence and the comforting scent of lavender, her grandmother's favorite fragrance. Her red, tear-streaked eyes scanned the modest room until they settled on the sleeping figure of Grandma Margaret. Margaret was sitting in her favorite armchair, an old but cozy piece of furniture. Her face, etched with the lines of time and illness, appeared peaceful in sleep. On the small table beside her, a collection of pill bottles and a half-full glass of water silently told the story of her daily struggles. Ellie approached quietly, placing a gentle kiss on her grandmother's wrinkled forehead. As she closed her eyes, a vivid memory transported her to a moment from just a few weeks ago. Flashback. The tiny kitchen was filled with laughter and the irresistible aroma of caramelizing sugar. Ellie and Margaret, side by side, worked in perfect harmony. Margaret's weathered hands gently guided Ellie's small fingers, teaching her to shape the dough for their sweets. "Did you know these sweets have a special history, my dear?" Margaret said, her eyes sparkling with distant memories. "My grandmother made them during the war to bring a little sweetness to bitter times." Ellie listened, fascinated, as her hands continued their work. "One day, Grandma," she declared with childish conviction, "I'm going to open a bakery and sell our sweets all over London." Margaret laughed, a melodic sound that filled Ellie's heart with joy. "Oh, my darling, I have no doubt you will. And when that day comes, I'll be there, prouder than ever." End flashback. Returning to the present, Ellie felt the weight of her unfulfilled promise. Silently, she headed to the kitchen, determined to prepare dinner before her grandmother woke up. As she chopped vegetables, she struggled to hold back the tears that threatened to fall again. The aroma of the soup simmering on the stove finally stirred Margaret awake. She opened her eyes slowly, adjusting to the twilight filtering through the window. "Ellie, is that you, my dear?" Margaret called, her voice hoarse from sleep. "Yes, Grandma, I'm here," Ellie replied, forcing a cheerful tone as she entered the room. "Dinner's almost ready." But Margaret, with the wisdom that comes from years of experience, immediately sensed something was wrong. Ellie's puffy eyes, her forced smile, the absence of her usual enthusiasm, all spoke volumes. "Come here, my dear," Margaret said softly, extending her arms. "Tell me what happened." Ellie hesitated for a moment, not wanting to burden her grandmother, but the loving and understanding look in Margaret's eyes broke down her last defenses. She threw herself into her grandmother's arms, tears streaming once more. Between sobs, Ellie recounted the events of the day. Henry Whitmore's harsh words, the humiliation of being expelled, the ruined sweets, every painful detail poured out in a torrent of words and emotions. Margaret listened silently, stroking Ellie's hair. When the girl finally calmed down, her grandmother spoke in a gentle yet firm voice. "My sweet Ellie, you're stronger than you think. You know, sir, when I was your age, I faced many challenges too." Ellie looked up, curious. Margaret rarely spoke about her past. "I grew up in a small village. When my parents fell ill, I had to work in the fields to support our family. People were often cruel, taking advantage of a girl alone. But I never gave up." Margaret's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Every obstacle I faced made me stronger. And look at me now. I've lived long enough to see my granddaughter grow into the wonderful girl you are." Ellie absorbed her grandmother's words, feeling a newfound determination rise within her. But there was still a secret weighing on her heart. "Grandma," she began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you." Ellie paused, gathering courage. "The money from the sweets. It wasn't for a bakery." Margaret tilted her head, intrigued. "It wasn't." "No," Ellie continued, her voice trembling slightly. "It was for your treatment. I overheard you talking to the doctor about the costs. I wanted to help." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Ellie into a tight embrace, moved by her granddaughter's love and bravery. "Oh, my darling," Margaret whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Your grandma is stronger than she looks, you know? Ellie pulled back slightly, looking into Margaret's eyes with renewed determination. I know you are, Grandma, but I won't give up. I promise I'll find a way to help. We'll get through this together. Margaret smiled, a smile full of love and pride. Yes, my dear, together. Always together. As the scent of soup filled the apartment, grandmother and granddaughter remained in a warm embrace, united by love, hope, and an unshakable resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The offices of Whitmore Industries buzzed with the usual hustle and bustle of another workday, but Claire could hardly focus. Sitting at her desk, her fingers moved mechanically over the keyboard while her mind wandered, replaying the scene she had witnessed the day before. Ellie's tear-streaked face, the scattered sweets, and Henry Whitmore's harshness haunted her thoughts in an endless loop. Claire shook her head, trying to concentrate. She was one of the youngest financial analysts at the company, known for her efficiency and discretion, but for the first time since starting her job, she felt torn between her professional duty and a growing urge to do something more. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, Claire opened a new browser tab. Her fingers hesitated for a moment before she typed, Child Street Vendors London. The search results left her stunned. Articles, academic studies, and NGO reports painted a grim picture. The number of children and families in vulnerable situations in London had risen significantly in recent years. Economic downturns, rising unemployment, and cuts to social programs had created a perfect storm of hardship for many Londoners. Claire clicked on one article after another, absorbing information about the complex causes of child poverty, the challenges faced by single-parent families, and the risks associated with child labor. Each new piece of information made her heart ache, thinking of Ellie and countless others who might be in similar situations. A particularly shocking graph showed a 30% increase in the number of children living below the poverty line in London over the past 5 years. Claire looked out of the office window at the city that had always seemed so glamorous and prosperous. How could such inequality exist behind the facades of wealth and success? Claire, are you all right? The voice of Antoine, her colleague at the next desk, snapped her back to reality. Claire quickly minimized the research windows and forced a smile. Yes, just a bit tired, she replied, trying to sound casual. Then, seeing an opportunity, she added, Actually, Antoine, do you remember that little girl selling sweets outside the building yesterday? Antoine frowned thoughtfully. Oh, yes, the one Mr. Whitmore sent away, right? Poor kid. She looked so scared. Claire nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for not intervening. Do you know if anyone's seen her around again? Not sure, Antoine replied, scratching his chin. But I think I heard Matilda at reception mention seeing a girl selling sweets at Hyde Park yesterday afternoon. Could be her. Claire's heart quickened at the possibility. Hyde Park wasn't far from the office. Maybe if she left work a little early. Thanks, Antoine, she said, trying not to sound too eager. I was just curious. Antoine shrugged and returned to his work, while Claire tried to focus on the spreadsheets in front of her. But her mind was elsewhere, plotting plans and possibilities. As the afternoon dragged on, Claire found herself glancing at the clock repeatedly, eager for the workday to end. As she packed up her files and turned off her computer, she couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrast between her life and Ellie's. Claire had grown up in a wealthy London suburb, an only child of successful parents. Her childhood was filled with vacations, piano lessons, and education at the best schools. She had never wanted for anything, materially or emotionally. Now, at 26, she had a prestigious job and a promising future. Ellie, on the other hand, seemed to bear the weight of the world on her small shoulders. What kind of circumstances forced a child to sell sweets on the street? What had happened to her family? And how was it possible that in a city as rich and developed as London, children still had to work to survive? These questions tormented Claire as she took the elevator to the ground floor. Stepping out of the imposing Whitmore Industries building, she hesitated for a moment. Part of her wanted to go straight home, leave the day's concerns behind and relax. After all, what could she, one person, really do to change such a complex situation? But then, the image of Ellie, Her eyes filled with tears and her dreams crushed, returned with full force. Claire felt a determination grow within her. Perhaps she couldn't change the world, but she could try to make a difference in this girl's life. With purposeful steps, Claire headed toward Hyde Park. The sprawling park, with its manicured gardens and elegant monuments, was alive with families enjoying the sunny late afternoon. Claire walked the winding paths, her eyes scanning every face, searching for the young sweet seller. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, Claire was about to give up. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the park. Then she heard it. "Homemade sweets, special recipe from my grandma." Claire turned quickly, her heart racing. There was Ellie, her basket of sweets nearly empty, her voice tired but still determined. Without hesitation, Claire approached her. "Hello," she said softly, not wanting to startle the girl. "Do you remember me? I work at the building where you were yesterday." Ellie's eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment Claire feared she might run away. But the girl merely clutched her basket tightly to her chest, looking at Claire with a mixture of caution and curiosity. I wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday," Claire continued, her voice sincere. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to help." Ellie tilted her head, studying Claire's face carefully. After a long moment, she asked in a soft but firm voice, "Why? Why do you want to help me?" The question caught Claire off guard. Why, indeed? She barely knew this girl. But looking at Ellie, standing bravely despite everything, Claire knew the answer. "Because it's the right thing to do," she replied simply. "And because all of us, at some point, need someone to believe in us." A small smile crept onto Ellie's face, the first Claire had seen. It was like a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds. "So," Claire said, feeling a bit lighter, "why don't you tell me about these famous sweets of yours?" As Ellie began to talk, her eyes lighting up as she described her grandmother's recipes, Claire felt she was at the start of something meaningful. She didn't know exactly how, but she was determined to make a difference in this girl's life, and perhaps in many others. The sun set over London, casting a golden glow across the park. And there, among the century-old trees and the distant laughter of children playing, an unlikely friendship began to bloom, promising to change not just 2 lives, but countless others. Meanwhile, in his corner office on the top floor of the Whitmore Industries Tower, Henry Whitmore sat at his desk, surrounded by opulence. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the London skyline. The Italian-designed furniture exuded luxury, and the walls were adorned with expensive modern art. Henry appeared engrossed in financial reports, his face an impassive mask. But behind this facade of calm, his mind was elsewhere, haunted by memories he had long buried. Flashback. A young Henry, no more than 12 years old, walked the narrow, grimy streets of a poor London neighborhood. His scuffed shoes splashed through puddles as he navigated past groups of loitering teens on street corners. The building he called home was a crumbling block of grey concrete, but Henry kept his gaze fixed on the distant skyscrapers of central London, shining like beacons of hope. "One day," he murmured to himself, "I'll leave this place. I'll become somebody." The scene shifted. Henry, now 18, was in a heated argument with his father, a weary and embittered man. "Studying business? For what?" his father scoffed, a cheap bottle of beer in hand. "People like us don't go anywhere, Henry. The sooner you accept that, the better." But Henry refused to accept it. That very night, he packed his bags and left, vowing never to return. The years that followed were a blur of relentless hard work and unyielding ambition. Henry worked during the day and studied at night, surviving on just a few hours of sleep. Relationships came and went, sacrificed on the altar of his goals. Friends invited him out, but he declined, choosing instead to spend extra hours at the office or studying market trends. Gradually, his dedication paid off. An internship led to an entry-level job, which in turn opened doors to higher positions. Henry learned to navigate the corporate world with a mix of calculated charm and ruthless efficiency. Finally, at 35, Henry founded Whitmore Industries. The road to the top was marked by tough negotiations, countless sleepless nights, and decisions that didn't always let him sleep peacefully. But he had made it, he had proven his father wrong. End flashback. The shrill sound of his phone jolted Henry from his memories. He glanced at the caller ID, his eyes narrowing slightly. With a barely perceptible hesitation, he answered, "Hello?" His voice was controlled, but there was an undercurrent of tension. The voice on the other end was indistinct, but whatever they said visibly shook Henry. His face paled, and a bead of sweat formed on his brow. "I understand," he said after a long pause. "No, don't worry. I'll handle it." He hung up and stared into space, his mind clearly in turmoil. Before he could regain his composure, the door to his office burst open. Paul, his younger brother, stormed in. In stark contrast to Henry's tailored suit and perfectly styled silver hair, Paul wore jeans and a simple shirt, his dark hair disheveled. "So it's true," Paul said, his voice trembling with anger. "You really kicked out a child selling sweets." Henry rose to his feet, his posture defensive. "Paul, you don't understand. There are protocols, regulations." "Regulations?" Paul interrupted, incredulous. "We're talking about a child, Henry. Her child who probably desperately needed that money." The argument escalated quickly, years of resentment and ideological differences boiling to the surface. "You've become just like him, you know," Paul finally said, his voice low and laden with disappointment. Henry froze. "Like who?" "Like Dad," Paul replied, cold, calculating. "Unable to see beyond your own nose." The words hit Henry like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to retort, but no sound came out. Paul shook his head, weary. "I expected better from you, Henry. We both know where we came from. How could you forget?" With that, Paul left, leaving Henry alone with his tumultuous thoughts. For several minutes, Henry remained motionless, Paul's words echoing in his mind. Slowly, he turned to a small shelf hidden behind his desk. There, almost concealed among business books and trophies, was an old, faded photograph. In the photo, a young Henry smiled beside Paul and their parents. It was one of the few pictures where his father didn't appear drunk or angry. Henry touched the photo gently, a mix of emotions flickering across his face. The sound of an email notification brought him back to the present. It was about the merger he had been planning for months, a deal that could propel Whitmore Industries to unprecedented heights. Henry hesitated, his gaze shifting between the family photo and his computer screen. For a brief moment, a silent battle raged within him. Then, with a nearly inaudible sigh, he put the photo back on the shelf and turned to his computer. The business magnate resumed control, pushing doubts and emotions to the back of his mind. There was work to be done, an empire to expand. And Henry Whitmore hadn't gotten where he was by letting sentimentality interfere with his goals. As night fell over London, Henry buried himself in spreadsheets and projections, trying to ignore the persistent voice in his head that sounded oddly like Paul, asking if the price of success had been too high. The following days were a mix of determination and frustration for Claire. Every lunch break turned into a frantic search around the streets near the office. She scoured squares, parks, and busy sidewalks, her eyes always scanning for a small figure with a basket of sweets. On Wednesday, just as Claire was beginning to lose hope, fate finally smiled on her. As she walked through Regent's Park, a lush green oasis in the heart of London, she spotted a familiar silhouette. There was Ellie, sitting on a stone bench beneath a large oak tree, her basket of sweets by her side. Claire's heart raced. She approached cautiously, not wanting to startle the girl. Ellie, lost in her thoughts, didn't notice Claire until she was only a few steps away. "Hello, Ellie," Claire said softly, a gentle smile on her face. Ellie looked up, surprised and a little wary. She recognized Claire from the park and from the Whitmore Industries building. Her small fingers tightened around the handle of the basket, as if preparing to flee. "Don't worry," Claire quickly reassured her, noticing Ellie's nervousness. "I just wanted to see how you're doing. May I sit down?" After a moment's hesitation, Ellie nodded silently. Claire sat at the other end of the bench, keeping a respectful distance. "Your sweets look delicious," Claire commented, trying to break the ice. "May I buy a few?" Ellie's face lit up slightly. "Of course. I have vanilla, cinnamon, and chocolate," Claire purchased one of each, sincerely praising the flavors as she sampled them. Slowly, Ellie began to relax, her posture becoming less guarded. "Ellie," Claire began gently, "I'd really like to understand more about you. Only if you feel comfortable sharing, of course." Ellie gazed at Claire for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could trust her. Finally, she spoke. "It's just me and my grandma now. Dad, he left a long time ago. And Mum," her voice faltered. "Mum passed away 2 years ago." Claire's heart sank. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. That must be so hard." Ellie nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Grandma Margaret is all I have. She takes care of me, but—" She hesitated. "But," Claire prompted softly, "but now it's my turn to take care of her." Ellie finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellie revealed the truth about their situation. Margaret, her grandmother, was a former Whitmore Industries employee. She had worked as a cleaner at the company for over 2 decades, before being dismissed under circumstances Ellie didn't fully understand. "Grandma always speaks so fondly of the time she worked there," Ellie explained. "She says it was like a family. I don't understand why they let her go." Claire felt a wave of guilt and shame. How could she work for a company that treated long-standing employees this way? But what Ellie revealed next made Claire's stomach churn. "Grandma's sick," Ellie said, her voice trembling slightly. "She has cancer. The doctors say the treatment could help, but it's so expensive. That's why I sell sweets. Every penny goes toward her treatment." Claire was stunned. The courage and determination of this small girl were both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. She fought back tears as Ellie continued. I thought if I sold sweets outside the company where she worked for so long, maybe people would remember her and want to help. But then that angry man, Henry Whitmore," Claire supplied gently. "Yes, him. He made me leave. I guess it was a mistake to try." Claire placed a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong, Ellie. You're just trying to help your grandma. That's incredibly brave." Ellie looked at Claire, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you for saying that. Sometimes I feel so alone in this fight." "You're not alone anymore," Claire said firmly. "I want to help, but, Ellie, please don't go back to the company. It could be dangerous, and I don't want you to get into more trouble." Ellie nodded, looking relieved. "Okay, I promise." As they talked, Claire noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. A middle-aged man in a discreet suit seemed to be watching them from a distance. When he realized Claire had noticed, he quickly turned and walked away. Claire frowned, intrigued and slightly worried, but decided not to mention it to Ellie to avoid alarming her. "Ellie," Claire said, turning her attention back to the girl, "besides helping your grandma, do you have other dreams? Things you'd like to do in the future?" Ellie's face lit up. "Oh, yes, I want to be a famous pastry chef one day. I want to have my own bakery where I can create the most wonderful sweets in the world." Claire smiled, charmed by Ellie's enthusiasm. "And you know what?" Ellie continued, her eyes shining. "When I have my bakery, I want to use some of the money to help other kids like me. Kids who need help taking care of their families or achieving their dreams." Claire's heart swelled with admiration. Despite all the hardships, Ellie held not just hope for herself, but also a desire to help others. "That's wonderful, Ellie," Claire said, her voice filled with emotion. "And I believe you can do it. You have such a big heart and so much talent." Ellie smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. For a moment, Claire could see beyond the weary, worried girl to the joyful, dream-filled child Ellie was meant to be. As the sun began to set over Regent's Park, casting a golden glow over the trees and statues, Claire made a silent promise. She would do everything in her power to help Ellie and Margaret. It wouldn't be easy, especially given her job at Whitmore Industries, but Claire knew she couldn't simply return to her normal life after hearing Ellie's story. The revealing encounter in the park had changed something fundamental in Claire. As she walked back to the office, her mind buzzed with ideas about how she could make a difference in Ellie's life, and, perhaps, in the lives of many others. The boardroom at Whitmore Industries was buzzing with high-ranking executives and potential investors. Colorful charts projected onto the wall displayed upward trends of profits and expansion. At the center of it all, Henry Whitmore should have been in his element, commanding the room with his usual confidence and charisma. Yet something was visibly off. "Mr. Whitmore," his assistant's voice broke through his reverie. "Would you like to comment on the projections for the next quarter?" Henry blinked, realizing he had drifted off again. "Ah, yes, of course," he murmured, straightening in his chair and forcing himself to focus. But as he spoke about profit margins and market strategies, his mind continued to wander. Memories of his childhood in a poor London neighborhood blurred with the recent image of Ellie being shooed away from his building. Flashback. A young Henry, no older than 10, tried to sell old newspapers on a busy street corner. A man in a suit brusquely shoved him aside. "Out of the way, boy. Can't you see you're blocking the path?" The scene morphed into the recent memory of Ellie, her wide eyes filled with fear as his security guards escorted her away. His own voice echoed in his head. "Remove this girl immediately." End flashback. Henry swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, interrupting one of the investors. "We need a 5-minute break." He hurried out of the room, ignoring the puzzled looks that followed him. In the corridor, Henry leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths. What was happening to him? Why couldn't he get that girl out of his mind? Before he could compose himself, his phone vibrated. It was a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, he answered. "Mr. Whitmore." A tense, professional voice spoke on the other end. "This is from St. George's Hospital. Your father, John Whitmore, has been admitted in critical condition. Could you come immediately?" Henry's world seemed to spin. His father, the man he hadn't seen in years, the man he had vowed to surpass, was dying. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he replied mechanically. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Henry barely remembered cancelling the meeting or navigating London's streets. When he finally arrived at St. George's, it was as if he had entered another world. The waiting room was crowded. Entire families huddled in uncomfortable chairs, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. Henry, in his expensive suit, felt painfully out of place. As he waited for news about his father, his eyes were drawn to a corner of the room. There, a young girl, not much older than Ellie, was quietly selling small wire toys. She moved softly between the groups of people. "To help with hospital bills," she explained quietly to an elderly woman examining one of the toys. Henry felt a lump form in his throat. How many Ellies were out there, struggling to help their families? "Mr. Whitmore," a nurse called out, "your father is asking for you." Henry entered the hospital room with a heavy heart. John Whitmore, once an imposing and intimidating figure, now looked frail and small in the hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and machines. "Henry," John's voice was barely a whisper. "You came." "Dad," Henry replied, unsure of what to say. Years of resentment and hurt seemed insignificant in the face of his father's frailty. I made so many mistakes, son," John admitted, his breathing labored. "Wasted so much time, so much potential." Henry stepped closer to the bed, feeling a confusing mix of emotions. "Dad, you don't have to." "No," John interrupted. "I need to say this. I spent my life bitter, blaming the world for my failures, and in the process, I nearly destroyed my family." He paused, struggling to catch his breath. "Don't make the same mistakes I did, Henry. Don't let success blind you to what really matters." His father's words hit Henry hard. It was as if John could see straight through him, exposing the cold, calculating man he had become. They spoke for a few more minutes, exchanging words of regret and forgiveness that had gone unsaid for years. When Henry left the room, he felt emotionally drained, but strangely lighter. On the drive back to the office, Henry made a decision. He needed to find out exactly what had happened to Ellie. Arriving at Whitmore Industries, he headed straight to the security office. "I need the footage from the day that girl was selling sweets outside the building," he instructed the surprised staff. For the next few hours, Henry locked himself in his office, reviewing the footage. Every angle, every moment of the incident was scrutinized. With each replay, the weight on his chest grew heavier. He saw Ellie's kindness as she approached employees. He noticed how she flinched when people brushed her off, and then he saw himself arrive, Fury etched on his face, and the fear in Ellie's eyes. The scene of her expulsion, viewed from an outsider's perspective, was even worse than he remembered. The sweets scattered on the pavement, Ellie crying as she tried to gather her belongings, the disapproving glances of some passers-by. Henry paused the video, his own image frozen on the screen, walking into the building without a backward glance. Who was this man? How had he become so indifferent to others' suffering? His father's words echoed in his mind. Don't let success blind you to what really matters. Henry buried his face in his hands, feeling genuine shame for the first time in years. He knew he needed to act, to make amends somehow, but how, and was it already too late? As night fell over London, Henry Whitmore remained in his office, grappling not just with his recent actions, but with the entire trajectory of his life. The empire he had built now seemed hollow in the face of his conscience. And somewhere in the city, a little girl and her grandmother struggled to survive, unaware that their paths would soon cross with his again. Across town, Claire was also deep in thought, her mind racing with plans for Ellie and Margaret. Little did she know, the ripple effect of one small act of kindness was about to spark a transformation far greater than she could imagine. Claire looked around the office, her heart racing. It was lunchtime, and she had chosen this moment to start her secret mission. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she approached Antoine's desk, her closest colleague. "Antoine," she whispered, leaning over the desk divider, "can I speak to you in private?" Intrigued, Antoine followed her to an empty meeting room. There, Claire unveiled her idea, a discreet charity bake sale to support Ellie and Margaret. "But Claire," Antoine hesitated, "you know how strict Mr. Whitmore is about company policies. If he finds out—" "That's why I need your help," Claire insisted. "We can do this quietly. Think about the lives we could change." After several minutes of discussion, Antoine agreed, his eyes shining with a mix of excitement and nervousness. In the weeks that followed, Claire and Antoine worked tirelessly, carefully recruiting a few trusted colleagues. Matilda from reception, Lawrence from IT, and Amelia from marketing joined their cause, forming a small but dedicated support network. Challenges arose almost immediately. Some more conservative employees eyed their activities with suspicion. Whispers in the corridors suggested that someone might report them to management. "Maybe we should stop," Lawrence suggested one day, fear evident in his voice. "What if we get caught?" Claire felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "I understand the risk," she admitted. "But think of Ellie and Margaret. They don't have anyone else to help them." Her words seemed to reignite the group's resolve. They continued, becoming even more discreet in their actions. Meanwhile, Claire spent her nights researching healthcare assistance programs that might help Margaret. She scoured government websites, NGOs, and even international programs, determined to find a solution. One sunny Saturday, Claire decided to visit Ellie and Margaret at home. The address Ellie had given her led to a modest neighborhood on London's outskirts. The building was old, with peeling paint and a creaky staircase. When Ellie opened the door, her face lit up with a smile. "Claire, you came." The small apartment was clean and welcoming, despite its evident lack of resources. Margaret sat in a worn armchair, a thin shawl draped over her shoulders. Her tired eyes held a sparkle of kindness. "So, you're Claire," Margaret said, her voice weak but warm. "Ellie has told me so much about you." Claire sat down, instantly feeling at ease in the elderly woman's presence. As they talked, she couldn't help but notice the signs of Margaret's illness, the pallor, the frailty, the way she occasionally paused to catch her breath. "You work at Whitmore Industries, don't you?" Margaret suddenly asked, her eyes lighting up with recognition. Claire nodded, surprised. "Yes. How did you—" Margaret smiled, a mix of nostalgia and sadness crossing her face. "I worked there for many years, you know. I was a cleaner." What followed was a stream of memories. Margaret spoke about the early days of the company, when Henry Whitmore was a young entrepreneur full of dreams and ideals. She described how the workplace had felt like a family, everyone united by a common purpose. "Young Henry even gave me a brooch on my 10th anniversary at the company," Margaret said, her eyes distant. "He told me I was the heart of Whitmore Industries." Claire felt a lump in her throat. How could a company that once valued its employees so much have changed so drastically? "What happened?" she asked softly. "Why did you leave?" Margaret's expression grew sad. Things changed. New policies, budget cuts. One day, they simply told me my services were no longer needed. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Ellie, who had been quiet, moved closer and took her grandmother's hand. Claire felt a renewed sense of determination. "Margaret, Ellie," she said firmly, "I promise you I'll do everything I can to help. You're not alone in this fight." Margaret's eyes filled with tears of gratitude, while Ellie impulsively hugged Claire. As Claire left the apartment, she felt a whirlwind of emotions: compassion, anger, and above all, an unshakable resolve. On the train ride back to the city, her mind was already formulating new plans. She knew the bake sale at the office was just the beginning. She needed to do more, much more. Perhaps she could organize a larger charity event, involve other companies, or create a public awareness campaign. The possibilities seemed endless, and Claire felt energized for the first time in a long while. She had found a purpose greater than financial reports and corporate meetings. Looking out the train window at the blur of London's streets, Claire made a silent promise to herself, to Ellie, and to Margaret. She wouldn't stop until she saw justice served and genuine smiles on the faces of this family that had so quickly stolen her heart. As the train emerged from a tunnel and sunlight flooded the carriage, Claire felt as though the universe itself was aligning with her mission. With a determined smile, she began planning her next steps, knowing that each small action brought her closer to making a real difference. The office of Henry Whitmore was cloaked in shadows, illuminated only by the bluish glow of his monitor. For the countless time that evening, he watched the security footage of the day he had expelled Ellie. Each replay brought a new wave of shame and guilt. Ellie's kindness as she approached employees, the fear in her eyes when he shouted, the sadness on her face as she picked up her scattered sweets, all of it hit him like a punch to the gut. "How could I?" Henry murmured, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Then, something on the footage caught his eye. Ellie pulled a small object from her pocket, likely to show a potential customer, and Henry spotted the flash of a photograph. Intrigued, he paused the video and zoomed in. His heart nearly stopped. In the blurry photo, he recognized a familiar face, Margaret Laurent, a former employee of Whitmore Industries. "It can't be," he whispered, disbelief washing over him. With trembling hands, Henry opened the company's old personnel files. He quickly located Margaret's record, 25 years of impeccable service as a cleaner, followed by an abrupt termination 5 years ago. Confused, he delved deeper into the records. As he read a troubling story began to emerge. Margaret had been accused of theft, jewelry missing from the desk of an executive. There had been no proper investigation, just a swift dismissal based on unsubstantiated suspicions. Henry felt sick. He vaguely remembered signing her termination papers, blindly trusting the judgment of his subordinates. "My God, what have I done?" he murmured, consumed by guilt. Determined to uncover the full truth, Henry made an impulsive decision. He needed to see Margaret and Ellie personally, but he knew his presence could cause a stir. For the first time in years, Henry Whitmore decided to disguise himself. The next morning, dressed in worn jeans, a plain shirt, and a baseball cap to obscure his face, Henry drove to the neighborhood where Ellie and Margaret lived. The contrast with his usual surroundings was jarring. Rundown buildings loomed over narrow streets. Cracked sidewalks were lined with clusters of unemployed men, and the air carried a palpable sense of despair. Parking his car, a deliberately modest model, he began walking through the neighborhood. Each step felt like a journey deeper into a reality he had long ignored. Eventually, he spotted Ellie. She stood on a busy corner, her small frame nearly lost in the crowd. With her basket of sweets, she approached passers-by with gentle persistence, her face lighting up whenever she made a sale. Henry watched her for a long time, struck by her resilience and warmth. Even when people ignored her or responded rudely, Ellie maintained a brave smile. At one touching moment, Henry saw Ellie offer a sweet for free to an elderly woman who appeared particularly tired. The woman's grateful smile made Henry's heart clench. As he observed, Henry felt something inside him break. The Ellie he saw now was nothing like the image he had constructed in his mind. Not a nuisance, but a courageous child fighting unimaginable odds. Memories of his own childhood came flooding back. Henry remembered days when he himself had stood on similar street corners, selling newspapers to support his family. How had he forgotten where he came from? How had he become so blind to the struggles of others? The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He had strayed so far from his youthful values, from the dreams he once had of building something meaningful. The empire he had created, which had once represented hope and opportunity, now felt cold and soulless. With a heavy heart, Henry returned to his car. On the drive back to his office, his mind buzzed with ideas and plans. He knew he needed to act, not just for Ellie and Margaret, but for all the employees and the community his company was supposed to serve. Back at Whitmore Industries, Henry locked himself in his office. Ignoring calls and urgent emails, he began drafting an ambitious plan. Employee assistance programs, community initiatives, a complete review of dismissal policies. The ideas poured out of him. But Henry knew that broad changes wouldn't be enough. He needed to personally make amends for what had happened to Margaret and Ellie. With newfound determination, he picked up the phone. "Marie," he said to his assistant, "cancel all my appointments for tomorrow, and please arrange an urgent meeting with the legal and HR departments." As the sun set over London, casting long shadows across his office, Henry Whitmore felt both exhausted and energized. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, and that he would face resistance both internally and externally. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, driven by a purpose greater than profits and expansion. Henry looked once more at the photo of Margaret on his screen. "I'll make this right," he promised quietly. "For you, for Ellie, and for everyone I've let down along the way." Meanwhile, Claire was preparing for the next step in her secret mission. She reached out to her growing network of allies, brainstorming ideas to support Ellie and Margaret. Little did she know, Henry Whitmore's journey of redemption was about to intersect with her efforts in ways she couldn't have imagined. Claire stood by the office coffee machine, her mind racing with plans. Antoine approached, his expression a mix of excitement and nerves. "We've gathered a solid group," Antoine said in a low voice, "but some people are asking questions. What if this gets back to Mr. Whitmore?" Claire sighed, knowing the risk was real. "We'll be careful," she assured him. "We're doing this for the right reasons." That evening, Claire worked late, carefully coordinating the bake sale that would serve as a fundraiser for Ellie and Margaret. She sent discreet messages to her colleagues, finalized details, and printed flyers that she would quietly distribute the next morning. Meanwhile, in his private office, Henry was deep in thought. After hours of reviewing company records and Margaret's case file, he had begun drafting a public statement. His mind swirled with ideas on how to rebuild trust, not just within his company, but with the community at large. By the following morning, whispers about Claire's bake sale had begun spreading. Supportive colleagues discreetly contributed baked goods, and the initiative gained unexpected momentum. Even employees who didn't know about Ellie and Margaret were drawn to the cause. "What's this all about?" one senior executive asked, eyeing the table full of pastries. "Oh, just a small charity project," Antoine replied casually, deflecting further questions. Claire and her team worked tirelessly, ensuring that the event remained low profile yet impactful. Elsewhere, Henry was preparing for a significant meeting with the legal and HR teams. He had spent the night devising a comprehensive strategy to address past injustices within Whitmore Industries. Margaret's wrongful termination was just one of many cases he intended to review. "We're going to conduct a full audit of dismissal records," Henry announced during the meeting. "I want every decision scrutinized. If we've made mistakes, we'll correct them." The HR manager looked uneasy. "Sir, this could open the company up to significant legal challenges." "Let it," Henry said firmly. "The time for hiding behind policies is over." As the day progressed, the bake sale continued to thrive. By lunchtime, word had spread further, and even some higher-level managers stopped by to show their support. Claire felt a surge of hope. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to Antoine, watching employees gather around the bake sale table. That afternoon, Henry made a decision that surprised even himself. He would visit Margaret and Ellie directly, not as their employer or a businessman, but as a human being seeking forgiveness. Arriving at their modest apartment building, Henry hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. Ellie answered, her eyes widening in shock when she saw him. "Are you?" she whispered, clutching her basket defensively. Henry knelt slightly to meet her eye level. "Ellie, I'm here to apologize," he said, his voice sincere. "May I come in?" Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression one of cautious curiosity. After a moment of hesitation, she invited him inside. Sitting in the small living room, Henry took a deep breath. "Margaret and Ellie," he began, "I owe you both an apology. The way I treated you, the way this company treated you, it was wrong." Margaret's eyes softened, though her posture remained guarded. "Mr. Whitmore, it's not just about us. It's about all the people who have been overlooked or discarded." "You're absolutely right," Henry replied. "That's why I'm here. I want to make things right, starting with you." He explained his plans to cover Margaret's medical expenses entirely and to provide Ellie with a full scholarship to pursue her dream of becoming a pastry chef. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "You mean I can really go to school for baking?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Henry said, smiling gently. "And I hope someday you'll let me taste your sweets." Back at Whitmore Industries, Claire's bake sale had raised enough funds to make a significant difference for Ellie and Margaret. As the day wound down, she received an unexpected call from Henry's assistant. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Whitmore would like to see you in his office," the assistant said. Claire's heart raced. Had their bake sale been discovered? Was she about to be reprimanded? As she entered Henry's office, she was surprised to find him looking uncharacteristically reflective. "Claire," he began, "I heard about the bake sale, and I've also learned about Ellie and Margaret. I want to thank you for bringing their story to light." Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. "Sir, I just wanted to help." "And you did," Henry said, "but now it's my turn. I'm planning significant changes to this company, and I'd like your help." Over the next hour, Henry outlined his vision for a new era at Whitmore Industries: improved employee support, community engagement programs, and a renewed commitment to ethical practices. "This company has lost its way," Henry admitted, "but with people like you, we can change that." Claire left the meeting feeling a mix of hope and disbelief. Could Henry Whitmore truly be turning over a new leaf? In the weeks that followed, the transformation began. Employees noticed the shift in tone from the top, and initiatives like healthcare funds and educational programs quickly gained traction. Margaret and Ellie became unofficial symbols of the company's renewal. Employees rallied around their story, inspired by their resilience and the changes their courage had sparked. Henry worked tirelessly, driven by a newfound purpose. He personally oversaw Margaret's medical care and ensured Ellie's enrollment in a prestigious pastry school. At Ellie's first school event, Henry attended as her proud sponsor. Watching her present her first pastry creation, he felt something he hadn't in years: genuine pride. Claire, now a key advisor in Whitmore Industries' social initiatives, watched as Henry stood beside Ellie. "It's amazing what can happen when people choose to care," she thought. The story of Margaret and Ellie had begun as one of struggle and injustice, but with determination, compassion, and accountability, it became a catalyst for transformation, not just for Whitmore Industries, but for everyone it touched. The transformation at Whitmore Industries quickly gained attention beyond the company. News outlets picked up the story, and the tale of Margaret and Ellie became a symbol of resilience and redemption. Employees who had once felt invisible found renewed pride in their work. Departments collaborated on new community initiatives, and a culture of empathy began to replace the once rigid corporate structure. Henry Whitmore, once known as a cold and calculating businessman, became a vocal advocate for social responsibility. At public events, he spoke openly about his past mistakes and the importance of building businesses that prioritized people over profits. "Whitmore Industries is not just about success in numbers," Henry said during a press conference. It's about the success we share with our employees, our community, and the people who trust us. Meanwhile, Ellie's life took on a brighter tone. Her days at the pastry school were filled with excitement and learning. She excelled in her classes, earning praise from her instructors for her creativity and dedication. Margaret, her health improving thanks to top-notch care, often accompanied Ellie to events at the school. Seeing her granddaughter thrive brought her immense joy and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. One evening, Ellie sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, sketching ideas for pastries. "Grandma," she said, "when I open my bakery, I want to name it after you. Margaret Sweets. What do you think?" Tears welled in Margaret's eyes as she hugged Ellie. "I think it's perfect, my darling." At Whitmore Industries, Claire's role as head of social initiatives expanded. She worked closely with community leaders, NGOs, and government programs to develop impactful projects. One such initiative was a scholarship fund for underprivileged children, inspired by Ellie's journey. "No child should have to struggle for education," Claire declared at the fund's launch event. The scholarship program quickly became a cornerstone of the company's new mission. Employees volunteered to mentor recipients, fostering a sense of unity and purpose within the organization. Henry E., watching the progress of these initiatives, often reflected on how far the company, and he himself, had come. He made it a point to visit the communities benefiting from their programs, listening to stories and learning from those they aimed to support. At one such visit, a child handed Henry a small handwritten note. "Thank you for helping my family," it read. The simple gesture brought tears to his eyes, a reminder of why he had started this journey of change. As Whitmore Industries continued to grow, the company established a partnership with Ellie's pastry school. The collaboration created internship opportunities for students and supplied the company cafeteria with their creations. Ellie, now a standout student, was one of the first to participate. Her pastries became a favorite among employees who eagerly awaited her new recipes. "You're going to be famous one day, Ellie," Claire said, sampling a delicate tart. "And when that happens, we'll all be able to say we knew you when—" Ellie laughed, but her eyes shone with determination. "I just want to make people happy with my sweets," she said, "and help others the way people have helped me." Margaret, sitting nearby, beamed with pride. "You already do, sweetheart," she said. "More than you know." A year after the changes began, Whitmore Industries hosted a large event to celebrate its transformation. Employees, community members, and partners gathered in the company's newly renovated atrium. The space, once stark and intimidating, had been redesigned to be welcoming and vibrant. Photographs of employees and community projects adorned the walls, and a central display highlighted the scholarship fund and other initiatives. Henry took the stage, his expression a mix of gratitude and humility. "A year ago, I stood before many of you as a man who had lost his way," he began. "Today, I stand here not as a perfect leader, but as someone who has learned from his mistakes." He turned to Ellie and Margaret, seated in the front row. "And I owe much of that learning to two extraordinary people," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "Ellie and Margaret, your courage and kindness have inspired us all." Ellie joined Henry on stage, holding a tray of her latest creations. "I made these to say thank you," she said with a shy smile. "Not just to Mr. Whitmore, but to everyone here who believed in me." The crowd erupted in applause as Henry sampled one of Ellie's pastries. "Delicious," he declared, earning laughter and cheers. Claire, standing nearby, felt a swell of pride. The journey had been challenging, but moments like this reminded her why it was worth every effort. The event concluded with a video montage showcasing the impact of Whitmore Industries' new initiatives. Faces of employees, community members, and scholarship recipients filled the screen, accompanied by heartfelt testimonials. As the lights dimmed, the audience erupted into a standing ovation. Henry, Claire, Ellie, and Margaret stood together, united by the incredible journey they had shared. In the weeks following the celebration, Whitmore Industries continued to expand its programs. The company became a model for ethical business practices, attracting partnerships and accolades from across the industry. Ellie's story, once a tale of struggle, became a beacon of hope. Her pastries gained a following beyond the company, and plans for her own bakery began to take shape. Margaret, now fully recovered, often reflected on the extraordinary turn their lives had taken. "It's amazing what can happen when people choose to care," she said to Claire during one of their visits. "It really is," Claire agreed. "And this is just the beginning." As London's skyline glittered in the evening light, Whitmore Industries stood as a testament to the power of change. What had once been a symbol of corporate detachment was now a beacon of compassion and progress. For Ellie, Margaret, Claire, and Henry, the journey was far from over, but they faced the future with hope, knowing that together they could continue to make the world a sweeter, better place. As the days turned into months, Whitmore Industries became more than just a company. It became a symbol of hope. Employees who had once felt disconnected from their work now found purpose in the company's renewed mission. The programs launched during the transformation continued to grow. The scholarship fund expanded, helping dozens of young people like Ellie pursue their dreams. The community outreach initiatives brought resources and support to neighborhoods once overlooked. Ellie, now in her final year at the pastry school, worked tirelessly to perfect her craft. Her instructors often praised her creativity and precision, predicting a bright future for her. Margaret, no longer burdened by her illness, began volunteering at local charities. She found joy in helping others, often saying, "If someone hadn't cared for us, we wouldn't be here today." Henry, meanwhile, made it his personal mission to ensure that the changes at Whitmore Industries were not just superficial. He held regular meetings with employees at every level, listening to their concerns and ideas. "Our company is only as strong as the people who build it," he often reminded his leadership team, "and it's our job to support and uplift them." Claire's role continued to expand, and she became a key figure in the company's public image. Her dedication to social impact initiatives earned her recognition in the corporate world, but she remained focused on the mission rather than the accolades. One day, as Claire reviewed a new project proposal, Henry entered her office. "I've been thinking," he said, "about launching a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. What do you think?" Claire's eyes lit up. "I think it's a brilliant idea, and I know just the person to help lead it." Henry smiled. "Ellie." "Exactly," Claire said. "She has a story that will inspire others, and she's already proven she has the determination and creativity to succeed." Ellie was thrilled when she heard about the opportunity. "You really think I can do this?" she asked Claire during one of their meetings. "I know you can," Claire replied. "You've already shown that you're not just talented, you're a leader." The mentorship program, named Ellie's Initiative, was launched with great success. It paired aspiring entrepreneurs with experienced mentors, creating opportunities for young people to develop their skills and pursue their dreams. Ellie often spoke at events for the program, sharing her journey from selling sweets on the streets to becoming a pastry chef and a mentor. Her story resonated deeply with the participants, many of whom saw themselves in her struggles and triumphs. Margaret, always by Ellie's side, became a beloved figure within the program. Her warmth and wisdom made her a natural mentor, and she often reminded the participants, "Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you use it to help others." As Ellie's name grew in the culinary world, offers began pouring in. Renowned chefs and restaurateurs reached out, eager to collaborate with the young pastry chef whose story had touched so many. But Ellie remained focused on her dream, opening her own bakery. With the support of Whitmore Industries and the mentorship program, she began planning the grand opening of Margaret's Sweets. The bakery was located in the heart of London, in a vibrant neighborhood that mirrored the diversity and resilience of its owner. The interior was warm and inviting, decorated with photographs of Margaret and Ellie's journey. On opening day, the bakery was filled with friends, family, and supporters. Claire and Henry were among the first to arrive, their faces beaming with pride. Ellie greeted each guest personally, her gratitude evident in every word. "This bakery isn't just mine," she said during her opening speech. "It belongs to everyone who believed in me, who supported us when we needed it most." As the first customers sampled Ellie's creations, the room filled with laughter and delight. Margaret watched from a corner, her heart swelling with pride. Henry approached her, holding a cup of tea. "You must be proud," he said. Margaret smiled. "More than I can put into words, and I owe much of this to you, Mr. Whitmore." "Please," Henry said, shaking his head, "call me Henry, and if anyone owes anything, it's me. Your story reminded me of what truly matters." The success of Margaret's Sweets extended far beyond the bakery itself. Ellie's story continued to inspire others, and the mentorship program flourished under her guidance. As the months went by, Whitmore Industries became a case study in corporate transformation. Business schools analyzed its journey, and Henry was invited to speak at conferences about the power of accountability and change. Despite the accolades, Henry remained humble. "This isn't about me," he often said. "It's about the people who gave me a second chance to make things right." Claire, too, continued to thrive in her role, balancing her professional success with a commitment to the causes she cared about. She often reflected on how one small act, reaching out to Ellie in the park, had set so much in motion. On the first anniversary of the bakery's opening, Ellie hosted a celebration to thank her supporters. As the guests enjoyed her newest creations, she made a heartfelt announcement. "Today, I'm launching a foundation to support young people with big dreams," Ellie said. "Just like people believed in me, I want to help others believe in themselves." The foundation, named Sweet Dreams, became an extension of Ellie's vision. It funded scholarships, provided mentorship, and supported community projects, continuing the legacy of generosity that had shaped her journey. As the evening drew to a close, Ellie stood with Margaret, Claire, and Henry watching the lively crowd. "We've come a long way," she said softly. "And there's so much more to do," Claire added, smiling. Henry nodded. "But with people like you leading the way, the future is bright." As London's city lights glittered in the night sky, the four of them shared a quiet moment of gratitude and hope. Their journey had been marked by challenges, but it had also shown them the power of compassion, resilience, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark incredible change. As the months turned into years, the impact of Ellie's foundation, Sweet Dreams, rippled far beyond London. Communities across the country began to see the results of her efforts, with countless young people receiving the support they needed to pursue their passions. The foundation partnered with Whitmore Industries on numerous projects, blending Ellie's vision with the resources and reach of the company. Together, they launched initiatives that empowered youth, supported small businesses, and revitalized underserved neighborhoods. Margaret became a beloved spokesperson for the foundation, her wisdom and warmth drawing people in wherever she went. "Every sweet has a story," she often said during speeches, "and ours is one of resilience, hope, and the kindness of strangers who became family." Henry Whitmore, now a changed man, often accompanied Margaret and Ellie to events. He had transitioned from being a figure of power to one of service, using his influence to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked. Claire continued to thrive in her role as the head of Whitmore Industries' social initiatives. Her work became a blueprint for other companies seeking to balance profitability with purpose. She frequently spoke at conferences, sharing her insights and advocating for compassionate leadership. Ellie's bakery, Margaret's Sweets, became a landmark in London. Tourists and locals alike flocked to the cozy shop, not just for the delicious pastries, but for the story behind them. The bakery's walls displayed photos and memorabilia from Ellie and Margaret's journey, serving as a testament to the power of perseverance. On a rainy afternoon, Ellie sat in the bakery's kitchen, experimenting with a new recipe. Margaret watched from a nearby chair, a cup of tea in hand. "You've come so far, my dear," she said softly. Ellie looked up, her hands covered in flour. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma," Margaret chuckled, "and I couldn't have done it without you." That evening, Ellie received a call from a renowned culinary institute. They invited her to be a guest lecturer, sharing her journey and teaching a special masterclass on pastry innovation. "Me? A lecturer?" Ellie asked, incredulous. "Why not?" Claire said when Ellie shared the news. "You've inspired so many people already. This is just another way to make an impact." Ellie accepted the invitation, and her masterclass became a sensation. Students and professionals alike marveled at her talent. But it was her story that left the deepest impression. "Every pastry I make," Ellie told her audience, "carries a piece of my journey. It reminds me of where I came from and the people who helped me get here. As Ellie's reputation grew, so did her foundation. Sweet Dreams expanded internationally, partnering with organizations across Europe and beyond. Ellie often traveled to meet with beneficiaries, bringing her signature warmth and optimism to every encounter. Margaret, though less mobile with age, remained deeply involved in the foundation's work. Her advice and encouragement were cherished by all who worked alongside her. One winter evening, Whitmore Industries hosted a gala to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of its transformation. The event brought together employees, community leaders, and partners from around the world. The highlight of the evening was a speech by Henry, who reflected on the company's journey. "What started as a single act of compassion has grown into a movement," he said, "and it's all thanks to people like Claire, Margaret, and Ellie who reminded us of what truly matters." Ellie, seated beside Margaret, felt a surge of pride. She thought of all the people who had come into her life, each playing a role in her incredible journey. As the gala concluded, Ellie took the stage to announce the next chapter for Sweet Dreams. The foundation would be opening community centers in cities across the UK, providing spaces for education, mentorship, and creativity. The announcement was met with thunderous applause, and Ellie felt tears prick her eyes. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Together, we can build a future where everyone has the chance to dream and succeed." After the event, Ellie, Margaret, Claire, and Henry stood together under the grand chandelier of the ballroom. They reminisced about how far they had come and how much they had achieved together. "It's amazing," Claire said, "how one small moment meeting Ellie in the park could lead to all this." "It's a reminder," Margaret added, "that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples that change lives." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've learned more from the two of you than I ever did in business school," he said, addressing Margaret and Ellie. "You've shown me the true meaning of leadership and success." Ellie smiled, holding her grandmother's hand. "And you've shown us that people can change, that second chances are real." The four of them stepped outside into the crisp night air. The city lights glittered like stars, a reflection of the hope they had brought to so many. As they walked together, the bond they shared felt unbreakable, a family forged not by blood, but by shared struggles, triumphs, and a shared belief in the power of compassion. "We've come so far," Ellie said softly. Margaret squeezed her hand. "And the best is yet to come." Under the starlit sky, they walked forward, ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they knew they could achieve anything,